Actually, Geoff and I were in the meeting in Bangkok with CZ and Vitalik, where they announced their support of DeSci.
Today, we are going to deep dive into the field of quantum biology with Clarice and Geoff, who are co-founders of Quantum Biology Ecosystem, which aims to leverage the principles of quantum biology to foster innovation and collaboration in the biotech sector. So, guys, welcome and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're happy to spread the word about quantum bio.
Thank you. So before we discuss your project, the Quantum Biology Ecosystem, I would love to start from a very basic question. And, just to provide a little bit of context to our audience who are mainly crypto, could you please explain in very, very simple terms what is a double-slit experiment? Given, we're talking about quantum here.
Yeah, and I think just to add into that, right, like not many people still understand double-slit experiments. So I think we thought we can just start from that simple.
So we have a division of labor here, and Geoff is the official double-slit experiment explainer.
Oh,
in fact,
that's exciting. All right, well, good. No, I must have been promoted. So, the double-slit experiment is a classic experiment in quantum physics. Essentially, you have a wall that has two slits in it, and you fire photons, essentially one at a time, at
electrons.
Electrons. Doesn't it work for photons also?
It works for photons too, but the cool thing is that it also works for electrons.
I guess, there's an interesting question. Which part of it? You get the diffusion. You get the same diffusion pattern for photons, right?
You're correct. If you fire single photons,
then you get it. Yeah, that's right. So essentially you fire the photons or electrons one at a time, and you fire them such that they go through one or the other slit, and then you have a barrier or wall past the two slits, and then you have a detector so that you get to see what's the pattern that gets created as the particles go through. Now, the thing you'd expect to see is basically a clustering in one area or behind one slit and a clustering in the other area. It turns out that you end up seeing something really different. You end up seeing a pattern that shows up on the detecting wall that much more that looks like, rather than firing a particle through one or the other slit, it was like a wave passed, as though it was a wave in a fluid that passed through both slits, such that the two parts coming out of the slits. Lost you guys? Yep, there you are. That the waves coming out of the two slits then interfere with each other and produce this much more complicated pattern on the wall. And so then everybody, when this was first detected, it's sort of very confusing. What do we make of this? But and through a bunch of twists and turns, we end up with equations that describe what happened, and the explanation that we've been using is to talk in terms of there being possibilities being explored. So instead of thinking about it as though you're either firing a particle or a wave at the barrier, what's happening is that the universe explores the possibility that the photon or electron goes through one slit while exploring the possibility that it goes through the other slit. It's like, in movies where you see branching paths happening at the same time. It's that idea. But then you have to imagine that the different possibilities, that the exploration of these possibilities interferes with one another in a way that is actually precisely described by this mathematical equation, such that when you then actually see what happens at the end, what happens at the end is determined, it occurs with a probability that is determined by the mathematical equation. And so this is why when you fire a single particle through, instead of it just going through one slit and hitting the barrier or going through the other, the exploration of possibilities goes through, is occurring at the same time, and there's interference, and then you get a result with different probabilities at the end. And that's how you can have something that both exhibits wave-like behavior and particle-like behavior at the same time. Because what you have is ultimately, when you measure a particle, but the possibilities that got explored interfered with each other in a wave-like pattern.
And what it means profoundly can be understood by an analogy. It's an imperfect analogy, but it's in the following way. If you were throwing a big ball through a wall with two slits, there's no way. If the ball goes through, the ball either goes through the top slit or the bottom slit, right? It's like a flip switch. It's either here or here. But at the very tiny length scales and time scales of quantum mechanics, flip switches start becoming dimmer switches, where the ball, the tiny ball that is an electron or a single photon, it can actually be in a dimmer switch position of a little bit going through the upper part and a little bit going through the lower slit at the same time. And the different probabilities that Geoff mentioned is like the position of the dimmer switch. I think actually that's a quite nice way of putting it. Like flip switch become dimmer switch.
Well, yeah, I think that corresponds to getting the sort of smooth probabilities. So the reason that this is, people hear about quantum physics and they think, well, this is going to be too complicated and it's not the sort of thing that, people could actually understand. It's because, as far as we can tell, reality is doing this very weird thing at the bottom. It's you would, when we look at regular sort of macro-sized objects, you put your notebook down. The notebook does not appear to explore all the possibilities for where it could be located, such that when you check, you get an answer with probability given by, it's like you just put it down and it's right there. And that's all. But there's no reason necessarily to suppose that the way very, very small things or very fast things end up behaving like larger or slower things. And so so this is, I think, sort of the thing that has made quantum physics seem special. Now, I'm sure you're going to ask about how this ends up relating to biology, but I'll let you guys ask.
Yeah, no, I think thank you for the explanation. I think it's always good to, even if audience have heard that, I think it's always reverse those things and get to hear from the experts themselves. So I think, my next question, I think, Geoff, you obviously highlighted and pointed out is, I think the first experiment, I believe, was done with a photon, which is a light particle, right? And then, what is the biology field seeing? Because I read some papers where they've done some experiments with atoms, which are the bigger molecules, and then they'll actually go on even further with protein. I think there are some double-slit experiments done on protein type.
That is correct. There is a small peptide that can be made to interfere in the same way that a single electron would.
We can send a peptide through the two slits and get the interference?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, cool. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I was saying there was the biggest particle that I think, the quantum fields have done experiments on. I don't believe that there was an experiment on bigger than peptides. What is the latest development in that field of double slit?
So if it's not a peptide, it's going to be something from Marcus Arndt group in the University of Vienna. They are the people who are really pushing this forward, right? Showing that larger things can also be quantum if you take appropriate care of things. But just so that I already preempt the questions that are going to follow, the phenomena in biology that we care about are also going to explore the same phenomenon of interference that we call superposition, except our superposition is still very, very small. For the things that we're going to discuss in biology, we never talk about peptides or proteins being in a superposition at all. It's just like tiny things that, in fact, electrons or electron spins. I'll talk about spins in a second if you're curious. But the important part for that's going to come very soon for the biology is the fact that there are evidence points to the fact that there might be tiny chemical phenomena, tiny quantum chemical phenomena happening inside proteins, for example, that have an inordinate, a macroscopic effect on biological function. I think that one of the ways that we've been refining our way of explaining this is the fact that there might be this scale shift between a quantum phenomena actually ending up impacting biology macroscopically. But this is just to say that we're not going to say crazy things like a cell is in a superposition state. That's not what this is about at all.
I think that's a very, very good point. But why don't we start with, because I think there were two big things in quantum physics, right? So superposition, entanglement, right? And then obviously you highlighted the superposition. But quickly, what those two things are, because you can't learn quantum physics without learning those two key things. And then quantum jump might be quantum tunneling might be a third big thing that has come up, especially in biology. So we'll if you just go through that quickly, we'll move into the biology field and what you guys are working on. But
can I give it a shot? Sorry.
Go for it.
So okay, so
I need to make a comment here. Geoff is trained as a philosopher. He has a command of of physics in general that is awesome. We've been working together for more than a year now, and I trust him with the physics explanations like 100%. So go ahead.
Well, that's good. I'm hoping to get to the point where I trust myself 100% with the explanations. My background in philosophy helps me to think logically about the different possibilities, but I've found that it's been fascinating to learn about the physics. So I talked about this idea of the exploration of multiple possibilities. So it's like the universe explores the possibility that the electron goes through one slit and explores the possibility it goes through the other. The term superposition just refers to what's happened. That's just referring to when multiple possibilities are being explored at the same time. So we say we need a simple word for it. The word is superposition. And so if you have a superposition of your electron being on the left or being on the right, what that means is that the universe is exploring both of those possibilities right now. There's this further term, collapse, which happens by the time we observe. We don't end up seeing a weird exploration of possibilities. We see one or the other. And so the collapse is the end of the superposition. It's the end of the exploration. And then we have some definite answer. Okay, so that's superposition. Okay, so far so good. All right, great. So then entanglement, you can sometimes get superpositions that involve multiple particles, and in particular involve multiple particles in such a way, so it's like, let's say we had two photons that were heading off in opposite directions, and let's suppose that what's happening is an exploration of whether maybe we send two photons through two versions of the double-slit experiment. And you could imagine setting it up so that the universe explores the possibility that one goes through the left and the other one goes through the right, or one goes through the right and the other one goes through the left, but not that they both go through the left or they both go through the right. Well, then this is really strange, because then if you look and you see that the first particle went through the left, that also means that the second particle had to go through the right, because that's the only sort of options on the menu. But so then that state is referred to as entanglement because what's happening with one of the particles is entangled with what's happening with the other particle. Okay, Clarice, does that pass that? All right, great. Excellent.
If just listening and you cannot hear me, I'm giving a thumbs up. Yeah.
Okay, so that's so far so good. That makes sense of entanglement. So then the last one, so we mentioned tunneling. Let's say and this happens inside of semiconductors, so this is like happening inside your computer. You have your electron going along and it encounters some barrier. Usually the electron bounces off the barrier. Sometimes the electron essentially hops and is on the other side of the barrier. But the thing that's actually happening is that the electron goes into a superposition. So essentially all of these different avenues are being explored at the same time. And a few of them make it through the barrier and the rest of them reflect. And then when you actually check with some probability, you get that, nope, we got the option that it reflected versus the option that it made it through the barrier. And if it made it through the barrier, that's called tunneling.
No, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for explaining. And I think I think you can't learn quantum physics without learning these three principles, right? Like I think these are the core. And there's so much work done on these things, right? But coming to the biology part, I think, so I think perhaps this is the right time to get into what you guys are working on at the Quantumbiology DAO, right? Because I think we can now get into more of that discussion. So tell us, what is Quantumbiology DAO? And sort of, what are your big vision there? Why you got together and why you started that?
I'll start with the science, and then Geoff will chain with the DAO. Let me tell you a little bit about quantum biology, right? So quantum biology is the foundational hypothesis that biology runs on quantum. That quantum physics might be relevant to how biology works macroscopically. Okay. Quantum biology is not new. One of the first people to hypothesize that classical mechanics and the laws of thermodynamics would not be enough to describe biology was one of the founding figures of quantum physics, Erwin Schrödinger. If you haven't read his tiny book called What's Life, it's in the public domain. He doesn't mention the words quantum biology, but he starts musing a little bit about how we might need other laws to fully be able to describe biology, or to involve laws that are not purely classical. Now, quantum biology has been a field that has never gained mainstream traction. And I believe that this is because all the data available that is consistent with this hypothesis is circumstantial. There has never been causal evidence that quantum mechanics is being explored for function inside a living single cell, right? We hypothesize, in contrast, that there is a bubbling quantum bath underlying very basic physiological functioning. And I am willing to bet that quantum physics is fundamentally at play in all cell types, in all organisms, right? So we're setting out now in our roadmap towards proving that those effects are, in particular, the magnetic field effects that we talked about a little bit about just before, that we've proven that those effects are real, are measurable. If you're curious on how we did this, I don't think we were recording when we talked about this, but have a look at our tadpole paper, bit.ly/tadpole paper. We can explain a little bit later on. But now we're set out to build the instruments that are required to unambiguously prove or refute that the origin of a lot of things that people see in biology, in particular how biology responds to tiny magnetic fields, that the origin of that is quantum. And maybe Geoff can...
No, you should tell them about electron, because we've already done superpositions. So tell them about electron spin superpositions and spin dependent chemical reactions. That's okay. That's the meat of it.
That's the key. I'll make a detour here, okay, and I'll tell you a little bit the field that I'm trained in. I'm trained as an experimental quantum physicist, and I build instruments to study and control tiny quantum objects such as electrons. In particular, I'm trained in a field known as quantum sensing. You can actually mathematically prove that if you use a quantum object, like an electron, as a sensor, your measurement is improved. In other words, the sensor quantumness enhances your measurement. In my past, during my PhD, I built an instrument to study and control such a electron, which acted as a true quantum sensor, in particular of magnetic fields in diamond, in the material diamond. It was a particular trapped electron in diamond that could sense magnetic fields in a way that is quantum. And in fact, if I were to describe, what happens is that it's not the electron that senses, well, it is the electron that senses the magnetic field, but it's the fact that the electron can be for long enough in a superposition state that is doing this field sensing. So in quantum sensing, physicists know that at room temperature, this electron in diamond can sense magnetic fields helped by this property that is called the superposition. In particular, there are many types of superposition. When we were discussing the double-slit, the particular superposition is like spatial superposition, where electrons can go through one slit or the other. Here, the superposition flavor, the superposition type, is of spin. Now, spin is a fundamental property of matter. It's as fundamental as mass and charge, and in the same way that mass measures how an object interacts with a gravitational field, charge measures how an object interacts with an electric field, spin tells us how an object interacts with a magnetic field. In the same way that charge can be positive or negative, spins are usually represented with arrows, and arrows can be either up or down. Okay. The idea is that if electrons can be put in a superposition of spin up and spin down, that means the spin property is in a dimmer switch state. That dimmer switch state can actually sense magnetic fields in a way that is quantum. There is no classical way of explaining, and I'm glossing over the details. I'm not explaining how that's done by the sensor, for example, in diamond, in technological quantum sensors.
No, that's fine. Clarice, can I just interrupt and ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Because I think you did a very good explanation there. But have we, as humanity, been able to measure electron? Because I think that's been one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Because we've talked about electron for a very long time, and obviously you're mentioning we know the orbiting part, the nucleus, we know protons and neutrons that are made up of. So yeah, what is the science doing around electronic style measurement?
So there are certain physicists, experimental physicists, have a finite set on how to infer the quantum properties of objects. Okay, in most, if not all cases, in most cases, what you're effectively measuring is the energy of a quantum system. And that gives you information on the quantum state that the system was just before you measure the energy. So a lot of atomic and molecular physics experiments are measuring energy in some form or the other. Okay, it's like very complicated energiometers. Now, for the spinning diamond that I was talking about, the quantum sensor, the technological quantum sensor that I used to work with, the situation is slightly different, but it's similar. I'm going, assuming that I won't explain in detail, but the idea is that you can show that the light emitted by this electron in diamond changes in average intensity depending on the spin state of the electron. Okay. This means that if you put the diamond under a microscope and then capture how much light is being emitted, depending on counted number of photons, you can infer if the electron was in one state or the other. This is not directly an energy measurement, but it is a good correlate of quantum state as well. Okay. I'm not sure I can do this without going into like crazy rabbit hole. But we're never measuring.
We can use Geoff for that.
Yes, I think.
Oh man, no. I mean, if the question is what is the state of the art on understanding and measuring electrons, I'm still trying to wrap my head around
You
what
don't measure
spin.
the electrons. Oh, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, the spin is typically explained with an analogy to angular momentum. But as I understand it, the electrons are also modeled as point particles, and it's really hard to think about how a point can rotate.
No. Nothing is spinning. Please, people, nothing is spinning.
Well, no. This is. I mean, you recall No, so I mean, I'd love to learn more about what spin actually is.
If had I been given the opportunity, I wouldn't have called it spin exactly because it's misleading.
Oh, what would you have called it?
I don't know.
I think this is
no, like people who study like the stuff inside nuclei. They have like crazy names for property like charm, beauty. Well, beauty I'm not sure, but charm I'm sure it is. So you have
for the quarks, yeah.
Yeah, for the quarks. You have different charms. So I would call it something else and not spin.
Okay, that's interesting.
So what about the wave function itself? Because if we consider them particles, of course you can measure them. But if they're part of the wave function, which is what we know they are, right?
So the wave function has different degrees of freedom. There's like the spatial degree of freedom, then there is the spin degree of freedom, right? So those things are sort of different. And when you look at the light pattern or light intensity that is emitted, you are effectively measuring the spin degree of freedom.
Right.
For reasons that I didn't explain.
The particle is a photon, we can measure it, yeah?
Yeah, the number of photons. So I didn't explain why. This is a very cool property called spin-dependent fluorescence intensity. And the reason why it's cool is the fact that you can use it as a handle in your lab to learn about the quantum state. Okay. So the cool thing that's even cooler than that, that's going to come right now, is the fact that there's plenty of electrons inside proteins that behave, special electrons inside certain proteins that behave exactly like the electron inside the diamond. Chemists are not used to calling it that, but there is true quantum sensing-like phenomena happening inside proteins that sort of explain how proteins can sense magnetic fields. Okay, and another cool thing is that they also have this property of spin-dependent fluorescence intensity. That is, if you look at how much light those proteins are emitting, you can infer the quantum state of the protein. The quantum state of the particular electron inside the protein. And that's important because electron spin-dependent chemical reactions, which is next slide. I would put a next slide. So,
right.
There's a class of chemical reactions that depend on spin, on electron spins. Here's how they work. There's a chemical reaction happening, and at some point, the chemical reaction comes to a crossroads. At that point, the chemical reaction is effectively going to look for the spin state of a particular electron that I said can be either up or down. If the spin is up, the chemical reaction continues through one pathway. If the spin is down, the chemical reaction continues to a completely different pathway. Importantly, the final products of those two paths are macroscopically different. Okay. Now, in the presence of a magnetic field, the magnetic field will mess up with the character of the superposition, will mess up with the position of the dimmer switch. So that basically it's going to bias the chemical reaction one way or the other via this quantum mechanism. So a magnetic field via this quantum property of electron spins inside proteins can actually have an effect on the macroscopic final products of chemical reactions that depend on that.
And that's how we get the link up to biology. So it's, you don't need to have a particularly large, so to speak, or all-encompassing superposition. You just need to have your electron in spin superposition in a way that produces this juncture in chemical reaction, such that you then get differences that occur at the macroscopic level, and that's a scale shifting effect. So something that's very small and very fast ends up translating over, and these sorts of reactions have been seen outside of cells, inside test tubes. The question is, can they occur inside cells? The scientists have agreed that there are effects from weak magnetic fields, the most famous of which is birds navigating using the magnetic field of the Earth. For most of those cases, the only known explanation is the quantum one. It's the one that uses the electron spin superposition.
The most likely.
Well, no, there's inside, so that's why, inside known physics. So it's possible we've got radically new physics, but that's unlikely. Inside known physics, you have either, if it's a weak magnetic field, you can sometimes have chunks of magnetite that respond like regular compasses. So this is magnetotactic bacteria are like this. You can also have conduction channels, which are specialized organs like in sharks and rays, that when the organism moves across the magnetic field, it produces an electrical current. But as far as anyone has seen, most cells don't contain the chunks of magnetite. They don't have things like the conduction channels. And so the only known remaining explanation is this one involving electron spin superpositions. And so the
found implication of that is that if birds are sensing the field using this mechanism, or if biology is reacting those magnetic fields using this mechanism, the profound implication is that electron spin superpositions, its quantumness can survive inside cells in the messy environment of the cell for long enough for it to matter.
Finally, we're getting there. Obviously, now we can discuss the DAO part. So thank you. It's there, good part. But yeah, so tell us, the DAO itself, it's a very new DAO, I believe, just been a few months. So it's called the Quantumbiology DAO. So the crypto audience, so people will know that means decentralized autonomous organization. We are launching a token on Thursdays. That's December 5th. And there will be an auction where people can purchase governance tokens. These give the ability to vote and then participate in the governance of the DAO. The purpose of the DAO is to create a community-based or decentralized effort to advance the field of quantum biology overall. Now, the things that, so Clarice in particular has been, advancing this idea of building a microscope that would actually let you detect the spin-dependent fluorescent patterns, and we think that that's the thing that really needs to happen to cause the field to break through. But it's just one of what are likely to be several different important experiments and projects and tasks and activities that need to happen. So the DAO right now, where obviously we've got the token launch, but apart from that, we are putting together a nucleus of
people who are essentially going to be the core of the quantum biology DAO community. And what we're really looking for are people who want to learn, think about, contribute. We're making plans for what does the future of the field look like. For people with relevant skills and qualifications, we're going to fund research. And then, but the idea is this community-based push to get quantum biology, to advance it not just to the point that everyone knows about it, but to the point where it's possible to start reaping some of the benefits. We've just been talking about the science the whole time, the sort of the physics aspect, which is great actually. I very much enjoy that. But people ask us, well, okay, what is this? This sounds cool, and we love quantum, but what does this end up producing, in the world at the end of the day?
We haven't talked about this.
No, I know. It's great. So
not a science curiosity. It's super relevant. Yeah.
So there's weak magnetic field effects in many different cell types and many different organisms. You have things like cellular repair and or DNA repair, cellular oxidation, ion channel functioning, cellular division rates. There's like many things, a big list of things that are affectable by weak magnetic fields. We take the step and infer that this means that there's some sort of quantum mechanism involved, and then no one's built the instrumentation needed to look at this sort of deeply or precisely. But once we do, then the idea is we can start decoding essentially what is the set of codes, what's the playbook that lets us learn how to use weak magnetic fields to beneficially affect biology. This, there's the main applications we imagine are health and longevity. The sci-fi future you can imagine. There's, Clarice and I have different versions of this, but the one I like is that you end up being able to equip environments, or you have it, your clothing is set up with the ability to administer very, very weak magnetic fields. But we actually know which ones you're supposed to administer when. And it's attached to your cell phone, so you have an app. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. And so let me have it be that the magnetic fields that cause sleep to be more restful okay, that's one. Or maybe you want wound healing to work more quickly. And so, you click on that part of your app, and now you're getting the magnetic fields that cause your wounds to heal more quickly. So yeah, this is, we can think of it sort of like
Geoff, talk about space exploration. We need to talk about space exploration.
Well, so right now, so a lot of people want to, people in crypto are going to be interested in the future. A lot of people want us to settle Mars and explore the universe. But it's currently understood that astronauts experience a number of deleterious effects, and this is usually attributed to microgravity. So then there's a question of how do you deal with things like microgravity, etc., except we just did this experiment where we raised a bunch of tadpoles inside a hypomagnetic chamber. So we blocked out the Earth's magnetic field, and we found that the tadpoles experienced accelerated development. You could think of this as accelerated aging. Right now, and we've talked to people at NASA, and they say, at least as far as they know, there's no ability to measure magnetic fields on the International Space Station. People have just assumed that because the magnetic field of the Earth is so weak, it can't be playing some sort of important role in biology.
It cannot be triggering
That's
a
right.
mechanism, which is exactly the same argument that regulatory agencies use.
Yeah, that's right.
So are you talking about the Gauss, right? The magnetic The magnetism of the Earth, right?
The magnetic field of the Earth, which is about 50 microtesla, which is like orders of magnitude smaller than your cell phone.
Right. I've only heard of the measurement, which is measured in Gauss, I think. And as far as I know, it has been massively reducing. So the Earth magnetic field has been massively reducing over the years. So it's like if you think when the dinosaurs were around, it was about 300 Gauss, and now it's about 0.5.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Has
I didn't know.
reduced massively. Yeah, again, you probably have like...
Well, we have come across there being indications that the magnetic field of the Earth changes, and apparently, Clarice has looked into this more than I have, but apparently changes in the Earth's magnetic field appear to be correlated with mass extinctions. And so there's a very natural argument, which is that organisms on Earth evolved inside the Earth's magnetic field, so of course they're taking advantage of it, of course they depend on it in some way. But the sort of rebuttal to that is, okay, but how? What's the mechanism? The magnetic field of the Earth is very, very weak. There's what is the mechanism? And then the answer is, well, there is a mechanism, and people just haven't wanted to think about it because quantum physics is a little confusing. But there is a quantum mechanism that explains how the Earth's magnetic field can be having an effect. And then we found that when we took away the Earth's magnetic field, that had an effect on the biology or the development of tadpoles. We're concerned, wondering, and about whether when people go out into space, they're outside the Earth's magnetic field. This could be affecting astronauts' biology. And then if you imagine in the future, traveling long distances in space or settling Mars, at least you want to understand how do magnetic fields, including weak magnetic fields, affect biology if we want to be able to grow crops on Mars and safely have children on Mars and so forth. This seems like something that we absolutely need to do. And then quantum biology is, the effect is going to be quantum if we want to understand it really well and conceivably be able to control it so as to, the simple version is just recreate the Earth's magnetic field wherever you can. But it certainly seems like we should actually study the mechanism and figure out how it works.
I think that's a great start if we could do that. But I'm going to circle back to this thing. But I think let's just come to the crypto stuff, right? So
yes,
I love the term you coined. I think, Geoff, at least for me, you coined the term nucleus of people.
Yes. Yeah, we got that from James Sinka at Bioprotocol. We've been for setting up the DAO. We have been working with Bioprotocol. They're the group that launched the first big set of BioDAOs. People may have heard of Vita DAO. There's Hair DAO, Athena DAO, the Psi DAO, Cryo DAO. There's a bunch of those, and they have a second cohort, and we're the first one from the second cohort to launch.
Right. But I love the term nucleus of people. I think that's amazing for crypto communities, the micro communities.
They're awesome. We've been super lucky to be working with them. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So a few things that I think you mentioned, which I want to reiterate, because they are the key, I think, why we wanted to have you here as well. So you're going to launch a token, I think on the 5th of December, you said.
Yes, that's right.
What is the token? Where it's going to be? Where you're launching? Is it in a decentralized platform? Is it a centralized platform? Just tell us a little bit more around those things.
Sure. So the token itself is a utility token. It confers governance rights. It's a governance token. And so the people who hold it have the ability to vote and determine actions taken by the DAO. That's and this is how all of the BioDAOs work so far, at least that the ProBio protocol has done. And then we're using the Bio protocol launchpad. So I think the address is
Launchpad.
Wasn't it? It's
app.bio.
No.
I think that also works, but officially they're pointing to launchpad.io. launchpad.bio.xyz.
Okay. Launchpad.bio.xyz. And yeah, so then
Why do you always say Z, not Z? What do you have against my Z? XYZ?
No, nothing against it. I'm just from the U.S. I mean, but when U.S. when U.S. people encounter Z, usually it's people from Canada saying it, and I don't know. I think we live and let live on pronunciation of the relevant letter.
That's awesome. I think I was saying that glad you both are here. I love the chemistry. I think their community will enjoy this as well.
Oh, and another thing about the token, unsurprisingly, the ticker is QBio.
Yeah, that was my question. So ticker. Could you please repeat, Paris? What is the ticker?
QBio.
Yeah, it's QBIO.
QBIO. Okay, QBIO. Okay. Good to know. I think. So what would be, so let's say tomorrow you launch through the Launchpad, 5th.
Yeah, on the 5th, so 2 days. Yeah.
In 2 days. Yeah. What and you're looking to build community over time, right? And you need people to
yes.
together.
We already have a Discord community, and so for reasons that are historic, I have been like the main community organizer in Quantumbio. And now we have a Discord that is trying to bring both the crypto people and the scientists together. So the Discord is at quantumbiology.community. That's a website, quantumbiology.community.
Awesome. I think you mentioned another interesting thing, which is you have crypto people and scientific people, right? Or scientists. How that was working for this on this board?
How was the chemistry between them? Because obviously, very, very different kinds of people.
I think we have 2 communication challenges. So there's first explaining quantum biology to people, which involves quantum physics. And then we now have the opportunity to explain crypto. So we're explaining quantum physics to non-scientists, and we're explaining crypto to scientists. And so it seems challenging, but I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are very optimistic about DeSci as a way to fund science that has trouble getting funded through more mainstream centralized funding institutions like NSF and NIH. The quantum biology community, I think, so far we've introduced them to the idea of the DAO, or the scientific community. We introduced them to the idea of the DAO. We got some people to join the Discord. But in fact, we're starting to do this on Thursday. We're going to start building out the larger set of priorities for the field as a whole, sort of setting up what are the major problems, what are the major tasks. But then if we're able to fund some of those tasks through the DAO, then that's the sort of thing that is going to provide a very straightforward incentive for the scientists to start educating themselves on the topic of crypto.
Right. So people can go to the Discord, they can engage. What can they really do? Because obviously you have scientists that are dedicated. Anything community can do to contribute to the cause?
So I think we need help across many different things. So if you want to lend a hand, we'll gladly take it. So quantum biology is very interdisciplinary. So if you're a biologist, if you're an engineer, if you're a physicist, I kid you not, I will find something for you to work on, because we need input from chemists, from people from across the spectrum, which is what makes quantum bio so daunting and so cool, right?
But it's not just people with scientific or engineering backgrounds.
Yes, totally.
So one thing is that, anyone who finds the ideas interesting and thinks that these should be explored more and are trying to learn more about it themselves and help other people learn about it, that ends up being extremely helpful overall. Like these, so we just did a couple Twitter spaces, and we had some people show up And, sometimes people have their like really basic questions about, okay, I'm trying to understand quantum for the first time. Here's my question. But like that itself is extremely helpful because essentially quantum physics has been hidden behind a sort of wall for 100 years where people are told that they can't possibly understand it. And as we're not expecting people to be able to, calculate whatever, do Fourier transforms on whatever, like that's, or look at Hamiltonians. There's not a math requirement for being able to think about the things conceptually. But then there's also communication. Part of communication is scientific and part of communication is through memes. And it's just, there's an interesting question. Are memes more sophisticated or less sophisticated than scientific papers? Well, obviously they, don't have a lot of calculations in them, but when memes are really good, they frequently make a point just super perfectly and communicate it with like tons of nuance to large numbers of people. And so I at least think about memes as a legitimate part of the communication effort. And I think anyone can make memes. And so that's another way that people can contribute. And so,
for social media too, we need to be able to, again, bridge those two very different communities, right? So,
memes. I think just as you said, right? Memes are the new culture. Like memes create cultures, which I think just highlights how important memes are today.
There's memes, which you could think of as sort of like low art maybe, but there's also on the higher art side, we've spent some time thinking about how do you represent ideas from quantum physics aesthetically. And if you think of this as a full spectrum communication effort, where you want to cover, like, there's room for artists to figure out how, what does it look like to depict the exploration of possibilities at the same time? What is, and we've experimented with this some, but I assume we've just scratched the surface. And it's really important to us to get, ultimately, the proposition is that biology, meaning our bodies, runs on quantum physics in important ways. And this is just not part of how people normally think about it. And we think that this should become something that's much more intuitive to people and standardly understood. And anyone who wants people to understand the world better, there's a way that they can play a role.
Perfect. I think very well summarized. Just one question on the DAO itself, right? Most of the DAOs, like you mentioned, right? DAO, Air DAO, like Kristina has spoken to a lot of those DAOs. So, we are definitely connected and building our own community around that. They have a very specific objective to get through, right? They have an objective that they want to launch a product for a DAO scenario, right? And there is an outcome. In case of quantum biology DAO, what is the outcome? Like what people are coming together, we creating communities, right? What is the outcome that you're looking for in the next 12, 24, 36 months? Because quantum field moves slowly, right? 100 years we are looking at the but crypto moves very fast, right? Crypto is like every day there's
don't worry, we're on a mission to accelerate our research.
I love it. But what is the timeline, and what are you thinking of doing in next amount of time?
We have a roadmap for the entire quantum biology ecosystem at quantumbiology.eco. Just click the technical roadmap link /roadmap. That covers what's going to happen over the next 5 years. At least that's the thing that sets the goal. What the DAO is going to do is, immediate actions, we've got the creation of the community, which we've already started. We're going to be setting priorities for the field, where the first meeting relating to this is happening on Thursday. And we're going to launch the token right after that. And then we would have to estimate what the priorities are going to be for the DAO. But I think it's a pretty solid guess that funding the opening of a new lab devoted to quantum biology, funding and getting started on the construction of a quantum microscope, specially designed for probing quantum effects in biology. And then we've been talking about the feasibility of getting people involved in experimentation on weak magnetic fields to see if we can start nailing down where we expect to find effects. This is so the big challenge is that the construction of the quantum microscope is going to take 2 years, and that's just that. And if I can figure out a way to make it go faster, then I definitely am going to. But these things are always built individually. Like they currently take this long. And so while the microscope is being built, and we're planning on having, video with, stop motion of the microscope being built. So people, some of this is going to be open science style. People are going to be able to see that. But there are other things like we have started talking about creating, and I think this is on the DAO roadmap, creating a plug-and-play hypomagnetic chamber so that so people studying biology can do so, can study the effects of weak magnetic fields in a more controlled way. This is something that when we had to create this for the tadpole experiment, this large box that was, special type of metal, et cetera, that's quite hard for people to do. But so producing instrumentation like that, we've talked about a hypomagnetic chamber enhanced microscope that would also be for biologists. But so the creation of the key instrumentation that's going to help to unlock the field. And then another task is trying to identify what are the magnetic field strengths and frequencies and directions and patterns of application that are likely to produce beneficial health effects. And then doing that there's like an exploration that can occur before we get the microscope up. After we get the microscope up, we're going to be able to do things in a much more principled way. So there's a number of different priorities, and then we're all going to, this is a collective effort. So we're all going to end up deciding what happens.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Excuse me. I think that was amazing. Now, just a closing, just like I think we'll start to wrap up here, right? Just wanted to get your thoughts, around a few things. The first one is around the DAO itself. Is anything that you haven't mentioned, you feel free to mention. The second one is, we are excited by the mission itself, right? And I think most people that are perhaps coming to DAOs are excited by mission. Yeah. What are the, obviously you've explained the applications here to us, the few applications that have been considered. Anything you can share with us, like the alpha, as we call it in crypto community, the edge that's happening today, especially the quantum biology field, like anything that's specifically happening that is very, very new that people might have not heard, but it's actually already been discussed in the scientific community?
I mean, I could add one thing on that. There's there's actually a couple papers that just came out, but the second paper in particular comes from a group at the University of Chicago, where it represents the best evidence so far that the quantum bio hypothesis is true. What they did was they took a microscope called a confocal microscope that's uses a laser, so it's not super good for extended use.
All microscopes use a laser. It's just that it's a laser that messes up with the cell. That exposes the cells to a lot of.
All right, so it's a laser that's particularly bad for cells, but they modded it so that they could look inside a cell that was at about negative 100 Celsius, and look for the special fluorescence pattern that has the quantum signature in it.
In a genetically engineered protein. So
so they did in fact see the quantum signature, and so that's no, it's a quantum computing group that seems like that's been their primary interest, but it's the thing we need to do now is we need a microscope that's like tuned especially for use in biology. We need to do it at room temperature, and we need to do it on proteins that are endogenous, so that we can see that and do it in a way where we can see that it's being used for function. But yeah, so this is a thing that came out recently, and then I don't know. We've been so busy getting things. I don't know whether news of this has started to slowly spread, but it's. I think it's a big deal.
And again, and just making sure that people. I think that people in the crypto community already know that DeSci is having a boom, right? Actually, Geoff and I were in the meeting in Bangkok with CZ and Vitalik, where they announced their support of DeSci, and I think that we both, Geoff and I, are at our core like very convinced that DeSci can be a way to unblock fields, to unblock even revolutionary science, right? We think that our DAO has a different spin, pun intended. So has a different spin to it in that it.
Oh man! Oh.
No, because our DAO needs to do groundwork of basic science to unlock all those cool things that we do believe will come, right? So we do think that DeSci will be a way to harness the power of the community. And my hope, it's not my alpha, but it's really my hope that our DAO could be used as a case study of whether this could work or not, right? And on our side, the scientists are super pumped to get this done, and to get this done fast.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Clarice and Geoff. It was an amazing conversation, and I definitely learned a lot from it. I'm sure Ankit learned.
Yeah, we both did, and that's why we wanted to be here together. We haven't done actually any podcast together. We wanted to jump in.
Nice, awesome.
And my mind is definitely blown away with the fact that you have conducted the experiment that proved in a way that magnetic fields, as you said, could accelerate the aging, or actually are very different from what I have read or I have heard, where magnetic fields actually, if there's
different magnetic fields up or down regulate, which is the cool stuff. If you find the code book, you can choose where to go. Right? It's not that all magnetic fields do something. It can go up and it can go down.
Right, I see. So again, this is amazing. I'm obviously not coming from the scientific background, and this is something I have learned today. So thank you so much. And it's amazing what you're doing, kind of, setting, as you said, the ecosystem for this science and for the communities and for scientists to come together, popularize quantum biology and create tools and to have products off the back of it. But yes, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
And I'll end just by saying, as you say, may the quantum be with you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So on that note, we can start.
I'll keep on saying until someone tells me it's crazy.